So as you all know, the robber baron and fascist agenda is in full swing, and they're really, really swinging for the fences because some of the stuff that's on the table now, I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the idea that this could be on the menu was just unheard of. But now we're in the pits of hell, and so these things are on the table now. So take a look at this. Ben Norton points out, Blackrock is already a major shareholder of many of the largest corporations on Earth, but now it's expanding to gobble up the world's infrastructure, including ports, pipelines, airports, and even power grids. Blackrock is spending $38 billion to buy privatized utility AES, one of the world's biggest power generation companies. The Financial Times described this as one of the largest infrastructure takeovers of all time. AES owns and operates power plants across the U.S. and in 13 other countries. As soon as BlackRock owns the utility, you can bet that it will significantly increase the cost of electricity for average people. That's precisely how we'll make a return on its investment. Workers will pay more to keep the lights on so rich investors can get even richer. So BlackRock's bid for AES signals an alarming utility takeover spree. Former Minnesota Power elite to AES, BlackRock is racing to dominate America's power grid through private equity buyouts. So the playbook here is buy it out, basically take all that power or most of that power and start sending it to energy production for AI and price gouge the shit out of regular people and make it so that your energy bill skyrockets. So stop and think about that. You know, something that's a public utility, something that's off the table, something that's pretty strictly regulated. Now we're looking at the privatization of that, which, by the way, as many people point out, this is like exactly what happened in Russia during the neoliberal period after the fall of the Soviet Union, where like a bunch of oligarchs basically bought every important industry throughout the country. Things that used to be public goods, utilities, they were bought by the oligarchs, and the oligarchs proceeded to totally screw over and price gouge the shit out of regular people. That's what we're looking at here. That's what we're looking at. So here we go. This guy says, cannot overstate how terrible this news is. The worst companies in the world are looking at this BlackRock win as their own signal to make their own moves on public infrastructure. Now they know regulators won't stop them. So here we go. We have a more perfect union video on this. Take a look.
This power plant is at the center of a battle between finance giants and the American people over who controls the basic necessities of everyday life. Almost exactly a year ago, we made a video about BlackRock. And remember how last time I was like, calm down guys, they don't own the whole world, it depends on how you define own, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, that video was about how they invest in stocks. But what if I told you there's a whole other side to this story where they're getting a lot closer to controlling some of the most critical parts of our everyday lives? Just 12 days after we released that video, BlackRock acquired Global Infrastructure Partners. And since that deal, they've been a lot more involved in infrastructure. You might have heard stuff like how they bought the Panama Canal. But now there's another deal you might not have heard about. They're trying to buy Minnesota Power, a company that owns this power plant and provides power to 150,000 people. This is a type of investment in what they like to call real assets, which is finance code for literally anything tangible. Basically everything we need to survive, like housing, infrastructure, and the land those things are built on. This is a test case for companies like BlackRock expanding into industries that we use every day. Things like water, hospitals, and electricity. And if they haven't already, they could be coming to your town soon. So why is BlackRock trying to change course, and what will it mean if they succeed?
Last summer, I scattered my wife's ashes on the South Quashnet River. I don't want BlackRock to own it.
So, BlackRock bought Global Infrastructure Partners, which is a big investment fund that itself buys up things like water and waste systems, transportation companies, and even large shares of entire airports. If you've flown in or out of London, congratulations, you're probably a customer of GIP. So BlackRock owns Global Infrastructure Partners, which is trying to buy Elite, which owns Minnesota Power, which owns infrastructure like power plants, dams, and the land they're on. But since people need power, it's not that easy, even for BlackRock, and there's a somewhat democratic process involved. This is State Senator Jen McEwen, who represents many of the people who would be affected by the buyout.
Wisely and correctly, we have a Public Utilities Commission, at the very least, to try to provide some regulatory oversight for these entities that have this monopoly over providing this essential service.
Usually when private equity and asset managers buy stuff, they just do it behind closed doors. But because people would literally die without power, it's considered a critical service, and therefore a regulated monopoly under Minnesota law.
BlackRock doesn't necessarily have the same amount of reporting responsibilities as a publicly traded corporation. We've had a lack of transparency already regarding our rates and the quality of services in our community in Superior. That ability to access that data would be decreased by the purchase, which would be a huge problem.
The community has made it clear that they oppose the deal, and a judge has already recommended against it. But it doesn't end there. The final approval is going to come from the Public Utility Commission, a board made up of just 5 people appointed by the governor.
What are the chances these people got bought off? We need an investigation ASAP into these people, because for them to approve this is fucking unacceptable. I bet they all got a pretty fucking penny. off this. I guarantee you they did.
Implications for anyone who uses basic utilities like electricity or water, i.e. the things that keep us from freezing to death in the woods. Because if they realize it's profitable, nothing will stop them. I didn't want to just sit around at my desk, so I came out here to Duluth to talk to some community members and leaders and hear what they had to say about the buyout. I went on a hike with longtime Minnesota Power employee and customer Bob Tammet.
I should have asked you if you want a walking stick. I got an extra walking stick. At your age, you don't need a walking stick. So I helped install the power lines that haul electricity from this powerhouse to my kitchen. This dam, the land we're standing on right here, it'll all go to the control of Blackrock.
Bob took us on a hike in the Boundary Waters to see some of the infrastructure that would be sold. He's been canoeing out here for decades. But power plants, lines, and dams aren't all that GIP and by extension Blackrock would get in the deal.
What concerns me about Blackrock purchasing Minnesota Power is that Minnesota Power owns a large amount of land where we're parked right now. They own a lot of real estate. Some of that real estate has minerals. So if Blackrock acquires ownership of those minerals, will they develop those minerals for the long-term benefit of northern Minnesota, or will they develop those minerals for the short-term profit of Blackrock?
This is hell. This is like robber baron corporate fascism. It's the worst of all worlds. It's the worst of authoritarian, totalitarian systems, fascist systems, and it's the worst of an oligarchy, a kleptocracy, a plutocracy. Now you have, this is basically like the systematic looting of the United States of America is going to unfold right now, and it's going to be greenlit by Trump regime thugs.
Back in Duluth, people were pretty concerned about their communities and bills.
We depend on Minnesota Power for our regional economy, for our heat, for our transportation, and indeed for our clean water. We need this company to continue to make long-term investments in our community, but that's not what this acquisition is about. This acquisition is about maximizing short-term profit.
There's a whole host of decisions that they're going to be making, and those decisions will no longer necessarily be just motivated by the board of directors working on behalf of the shareholders for Minnesota Power, a broad portfolio of people. It will just be these two private equity companies. If the Minnesota PUC does a good job and is able to hold down rate increases, the only outcome that I can imagine is that these two owners will say, well, we're not making as much money as we thought we were going to make from this thing, and they're going to sell it. And then who do they sell it to?
And this kind of thing has happened before in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan with a power company called UPCO. This is Alyssa Jean Schaefer, the Director of Climate and Energy at the Private Equity Stakeholder Project.
If we look at northern Michigan, there's a utility called the Upper Peninsula Power Company, or UPCO. This was acquired by a private equity firm in 2014.
UPCO customers have seen a spike in their rates many say they can't afford.
Wow, what a shock. Yet again, what a shock. So the thing that everybody says is going to happen is exactly what happened, that they're basically going to fucking price gouge you. This is also on top of like a genuine crisis in the sense that energy prices are skyrocketing anyway. Because remember, Trump cut off literally all of the green and renewable technology efforts to create power. And also the fucking data centers, the AI data centers that are being created. So like we're getting squeezed on every end here, and then you're also going to add price gouging to the mix.
Private equity firm took it over. Shortly thereafter, they raised the bills. A couple years later, bills went up again. Then that private equity firm sold it to a different private equity firm. Once the new private equity owners were in control, they raised bills again. Since 2014, UPCO, being owned by private equity, has seen 4 bill hikes.
There's nothing stopping Blackrock from doing the same thing in Minnesota, and in addition to bill hikes, it could even trample existing laws.
Well, today, Governor Walz signed a bill that requires utility companies provide 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040.
But after the deal goes through, we don't know if Blackrock will follow those laws. Their size and capital imbue them with the power to basically ignore this kind of thing. To them, the fees are chump change, and who do you think is more powerful, the Minnesota State Legislature or Blackrock?
There's no requirement that they pursue this clean energy vision. We're going into the sale on promises.
But remember, Blackrock isn't directly purchasing Minnesota Power. Global Infrastructure Partners is purchasing its parent company, Elite, which also owns Superior Water, Light, and Power just over the border in Wisconsin.
So we've been looking at double-digit rate increases every 2 years, and our rates are already some of the highest in the entire state, and that's not a coincidence.
So let's zoom out for a minute. If you saw my last video about Blackrock, you know that they don't really own everything, they just have a small percentage of ownership in everything, specifically publicly listed companies that you could buy shares of too. But this buyout shows a general shift in strategy. They're looking to fully own or majority own entire infrastructure systems by taking those companies off the public stock market altogether. And while Blackrock's just been dipping their toes into real assets and it's still a relatively small slice of their giant portfolio, there have been some big players in this game for a while now. Brookfield is the biggest owner of real assets, and real assets are the bread and butter of Blackrock's doppelganger, Blackstone. Even though Blackstone is overall smaller, they're actually much more efficient at generating returns for their investors. So of course Blackrock is now looking for their piece of the pie. Here are the totally not frightening categories of things these asset managers are trying to get as much control of and profit out of as possible. Water, farmland, housing, transportation, schools and hospitals, and energy and telecommunications, including data centers.
I'm sorry, bro. Like, capitalism is a fucking scourge. It devours everything. This is the problem. It devours everything. There is nothing held sacred under this system. Okay, look, yeah, we get it. When it comes to fire departments, that's off the table because, there's a bad incentive there. If you have private fire departments, what are you going to let a house burn down because the person didn't pay their bill? Like, we're going to let the whole block go up in smoke because a couple people didn't pay their bill? Like, that's insane, right? No, we have private fire departments in this country, right? Healthcare, hospitals, pharmaceuticals, all these different things. Police, the military, mercenary armies. That's when capitalism takes over. War. So this is what we're talking about, man. This is how cooked everything is. We need to have a system where certain things are off the table. Education, from the very beginning till the very end, fucking to graduate school, all of that should be paid for by taxes. It should be a public good, a public utility, for sure. Hospitals, healthcare, same thing. Pharmaceuticals, we should nationalize big pharma. There shouldn't be profit in big pharma. I just saw an article the other day. I think it was ProPublica. They said there's this cancer drug, I think it's a cancer drug, that made $100 billion, okay? Ready for this? Each pill they sell, they charge $1,000. How much did it cost them to make the pill? 25 cents. Okay, those are criminals. Do you understand that? That company, they're criminals. They're gangsters. They're thugs. That's what they are. That's a criminal organization. They're pirates. They're price gouging pirates. They belong in prison and they need to be there for life. See, this is what I'm talking about. Everybody used to understand. Certain things are too important to leave to the private market and to the profit motive. You need to have these things off the table so we create a society that functions for everybody, or at least gives everybody a chance at success. Now, we're going so hard in the other direction, so hard in the neoliberal capitalist direction, that we're now privatizing things that in the past people would have laughed at you and mocked you if you even floated the idea of privatizing this stuff.
So that makes the list really all the things I, for one, wouldn't last very long without. I don't know about you, but I personally love food, housing, electricity, and water, and want affordable access to it. Check out this house. It has lines bringing in electricity and phone and internet. It has pipes bringing water in and out, roads bring in food, and tenants pay rent. BlackRock wants a cut of all of those things.
In addition to potentially raising customers' bills, they might be looking for ways to cut costs. This could look like reduction in the job force. It could look at like reduction in operation and maintenance.
If you don't have enough people to do a job, you're going to get people hurt.
And the Minnesota Power case is just one point on the map. If we zoom out, there's a larger cycle we're already in. Here's the playbook. Asset managers buy the thing, often using debt, massive loans they get just because they're already rich. Then they run the thing as cheaply as possible for a few years and finally sell it, often to another asset manager or private equity firm, and ideally at a large profit. This is super profitable for guys like Larry Fink, but not so much for anyone who relies on the thing they bought. And there's a reason necessities like apartment buildings, water, and parking are all at the heart of this. They're things where even if you maybe kind of have a choice to use a different provider, it's logistically pretty hard or downright impossible. For BlackRock, that's basically free money.
Utilities in regulated states such as Minnesota have a captive rate base. They have captive customers. Having a group of customers that have nowhere else to turn for access to electricity, that is a very attractive financial proposition.
So how exactly do these deals work? They bank on you not understanding, so let's try to understand. Usually they'll set up an investment fund and give it a snazzy name like BlackRock Global Infrastructure Fund 4, and then they'll get a bunch of big companies to sign on to invest with them. The asset manager itself will invest a little bit too, just to show everyone else they have some skin in the game, but usually only between 1% and 5%. And then the investment fund, this thing they just made up like a group project for supervillains, goes and buys the thing. Investing is always about risk, but BlackRock's risk to itself is minimized because when they take out loans, they borrow against the company they're buying, not themselves. That's like if I bought a Honda Civic on a loan and then the car was in debt instead of me. And when that's a public utility, it's the customers or taxpayers even paying off that debt for them. This means you're not just paying for power or water or whatever, you're also paying off an asset manager's loan from a bank, which, if they default on, will sink the company they're buying, but not the asset manager that took out the loan in the first place.
Unbelievable. These are criminals. They need to be locked up. They need to be locked up. So your energy bills are going to skyrocket so that one of the assholes at this private equity firm can get, a third Lamborghini or buy a yacht, right? That's what they're describing. That's what they're describing. I'm telling you, man, there's a lot of people in this country that need to go to prison. The fascists, the billionaire robber barons. And if we don't reassert order and law and order and control of what's supposed to be a democracy, then we are going to be cooked as far as the eye can see, and this country will only descend further and further into hell. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.